a playlist original.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Live or die. Make your choice.
What are you waiting for, huh? What are you waiting for?
I'm not even gonna swat that fly. I hope they are watching. They'll see. They'll see and they'll know. And they'll say, why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
They're here.
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face. The blackest eyes. The devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
You don't really know much about Halloween witchcraft. The last great one took place 3,000 years ago when the hills ran red. Halloween. The dead might be looking in. Stop it! The world's going to change tonight, Doctor. Happy Halloween.
Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, the night no one comes home. Rated R. Now playing at a theater near you.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock.
It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking. Be in front of your TV sets for the Horror-thon. And remember the big giveaway at 9. Don't miss it. And don't forget to wear your masks. The clock is ticking. It's almost time.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster with your host Gaius and Jackson. I will keep saying it, just so you know, not changing the intro because Jackson is still very much a part of the show, but he's on a very tricky schedule. He loves and hates it. He loves what he's doing right now. Don't get me wrong, but he wants to be on as much as he can. We actually have 2 episodes scheduled to record on Sunday, and they're going to be kind of mixed up a bit, so you probably won't even feel his absence, at least episode wise. I felt it a little bit because I'm used to recording with him every Monday. We have a long-standing date every Monday, and the last 2 weeks we haven't, so it's been a little weird, but we are in constant communication with each other, and he's especially bummed because he wanted to be involved fully in Tales of Horror. He has scheduled 3 episodes that we're just going to bang out in one day, so he'll be featured on a few of them at least. But in the meantime, on this 3rd episode of Tales of Horror that we're recording, only one's been released so far for Psycho 2. The second one I recorded was Bram Stoker's Dracula, and that will be out next week. And the third one comes courtesy of my good friend David Parke here, who chose a really good movie because I've only discussed it on the peripheral of talking about like other Halloween movies, but never talked about this one specifically for an episode. So thank you, David Parke, for joining me. And I will let you do the honors of telling everyone which movie you chose and why you wanted to do it after you saw it on the list.
So, for those of you who've heard me on the pod before, Gaius and I grew up together, and Gaius was like the guy that introduced me to the Halloween series. Yeah, I was always told you don't need to watch Halloween 3, and all I knew about it, Michael Myers wasn't in it. So I stayed away from it until about 2008 when I watched it for the first time, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to watch it finally. And man, if I didn't love this movie, I could probably text you then. I was like, dude, I finally saw it, and I think I love it. And it's obviously, it's objectively a silly, not great movie, but the vibes are all there. Did Dean Cundy shoot this one too?
Yeah, he did.
So it
He
looks
did.
like Dean Cundy shot it, who shot Back to the Future, also the original Halloween.
Yeah.
And it looks great. John Carpenter's music is in it, and it has all of my favorite vibes from Halloween exist here. The story is whatever. The story is tertiary in this epic Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Join us on this journey, won't you?
Yeah, even though I've been a big fan of the Halloween movies for a really long time, it took me a even longer time to accept this one into the fold. I think for a long time, I remember when I was collecting back in the day VHSs, I was like, I don't care if I own this one or not. It was just like, if you looked at the rack, it was always Halloween, Halloween 2, Halloween 4, and no Halloween 3. And then same when I started getting DVDs, it took me a really long time to watch it. There were a few people that pushed me into watching it and with an open mind. One of them I will name David Gonzalez, who I used to write for Real Talk Inc. For a little bit and was on their podcast for a while. He was one of the people that were like, you need to watch it with an open mind, because I always like ranked it really low out of like anger or frustration that Michael Myers wasn't in it. Like, it just felt like some rotten stepchild in the bunch of Halloween movies. But it took that really to be like, all right, let me sit back and watch it with an open mind. Like, it's not a part of the franchise, it's a standalone movie. It was a very interesting experiment back in the day to do this way. And I came out of that viewing feeling the same way that David felt, that yes, it is silly in parts, even ridiculous in parts. But there are some things that make it stand out on its own. If I was looking at it as its own horror movie without the Halloween 3 title, let's just call it Season of the Witch, if that was what it was called, I probably would have thought it was a decently okay horror movie. And what I've gotten from it is, when I watched it this morning, I actually like it a little bit more every time I watch it. It definitely has some really solid, great moments too that I think stand out really well. It will get into why it was an interesting experiment back then and why it didn't necessarily work, but ahead of its time in a lot of ways too, for doing what it tried to do. I don't know if you remember this entirely, but when we went to that Halloween thing back in the day, this crowd, I remember their panel that we went to. I think most of us might have gone to watch. I'm not sure if I just went alone or if you went with me to watch this panel discussion for Halloween 3.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely, that was like on my schedule.
Oh yeah, I think you actually took pictures. Yeah, you took pictures too. I would say out of all the ones we went to, this one had some of the biggest fan fervor of the, because this movie, despite being murdered when it came out, has gained a bit of a cult following. And we talk about revisionist history a lot on the podcast. There's a lot of people that think it's much better than it was originally perceived back then. And like, I will say, like, a lot of the fans that were there for Halloween 3 at that event, they were there pretty hard, and a lot harder for some of the other Halloween sequels that were featured at that event. So, I can admit when I'm wrong, or if I should have given this a shot a lot sooner. I really should have given it a shot a lot sooner. It holds up decently well. It's not perfect by any means. And if anything, it is an interesting interesting experiment. I also think it's very interesting to look into perhaps like maybe the ego of John Carpenter back then. I know Uri Lorenz the Blondes, who like put up a lot of the money and stuff for the first two Halloween movies. I watched this behind the scenes thing on the Blu-ray, and this was in 2010, but I'm sure he's still like he felt strongly then. Like he didn't even try to say anything nice about it. He was like, when they approached me about doing a Halloween movie with no Michael Myers, that was a stupid idea. And he still maintained that it was a stupid idea. He said some nice things about letting Tommy Lee Wallace direct it because he was, production designer and just editing on Halloween, and he was a really good friend of John Carpenter, and he thought that was cool that John Carpenter was like, hey, here's this movie, like you should direct it. Also, he has a sole writing credit on it, even though other people did run through some passes on the script. He talked about that too, Tommy Lee Wallace, that since he is the sole writer on it, when the movie didn't do well, he was the sole person they blamed for it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just interesting, like how it came to be. And I guess before getting into specifics, just so people that don't know, Halloween 3 came out in 1982. John Carpenter and Debra Hill had no interest in making another sequel with Michael Myers. They didn't even want to make Halloween 2 with Michael Myers. Halloween was supposed to be like a standalone movie, even though it ends on a cliffhanger, in a sense. John Carpenter always said the whole point of that ending was to show like when Michael Myers is gone and you hear like the heavy breathing out of all the places you've been to throughout the entire first movie. That was just to show that like evil never dies and evil's everywhere. And that was supposed to just be the end of the movie. But they made a lot of money and they were like, hey, you should make another one. And in the case of the second movie, Universal Pictures was going to distribute Halloween 2, and this wasn't going to be like an independent movie like the first one was. They had a big studio behind it, and they were like, come on, John Carpenter, write something. And John Carpenter has said that he drank a lot of beer and wrote Halloween 2, gave us the whole like Laurie Strode is Michael Myers' sister, and depending on which adventure you choose in the Halloween franchise, that is the main plot of like several movies. He's not a big fan of Halloween 2, and that of course there are horror fans that love Halloween 2, but he's not a big fan of it. So when it came to doing the third one, he was not interested in continuing that story, but he was interested in like starting what would be considered like an anthology series of movies with the third film, meaning that you would have the Halloween title, and each year, should this have worked, there would have been a different horror Halloween themed story, which like I said, it's ahead of the time now because we see that a lot, especially in TV nowadays, not necessarily in films, but like in TV. And he got a lot of he had to help Debra Hill involved with him again. Tommy Lee Wallace was on board to direct. A few people that they like in the kind of John Carpenter family are in this. Tom Atkins being one of them. He was in the Fog, so he's part of the Carpenter Debra Hill clique as well. You'll see Nancy Loomis, who I think is now known as Nancy Keys at this point today. She was married to Tommy Lee Wallace back in the day, and she plays Tom Atkins' wife in Halloween 3. So there's a lot of familiar faces in it, but
Dick Warlock is in there too.
Dick Warlock's one of the dudes in the suits who are pretty actually frightening. Dick Warlock played Michael Myers in Halloween 2. And just to confuse people even more, there's even TV spots and trailers of Halloween playing in Halloween 3. And it has no relation to Halloween 2 at all. There is no Michael Myers, not even, I mean, the fact that they are really showing you in Halloween 3 that, Halloween's a movie in this movie. It's coming on network TV during the Halloween season that this movie takes place in. I think they were just trying to show like this is very much not going to be what you think it is. It's very much like kind of like a science fiction, almost like it seems like very Invasion of the Body Snatchers-esque, like a lot of that going on in the movie. And completely different from Halloween. I mean, Halloween 1 and 2 are slasher movies. This is not. But I think that it was a bold move. I don't know if it's necessarily smart. I mean, I guess what I'm confused about, maybe you could explain or you have an opinion. In the marketing, the trailers alone, like the old trailers I even watched,
I should have watched that.
Give the impression that there's no Michael Myers in this at all. It shows that it's a completely different movie. So I guess I'm wondering what the surprise was for most people when they went to go see it. But I guess I don't know. Maybe there'll be some kind of weird bait and switch. I don't know.
If it had come out today, kids that this movie is geared for would never have watched TV to see the trailers for it. You know what I mean? They would have just said, "Oh, Halloween." But in the early 80s, kids were glued to the TV and watching all that stuff. So you would think they would have seen the TV spots, but date night is what it is and all that jazz,
Yeah. And to show you how different the plot is, this is no knife picture, no slasher movie. The plot of Halloween 3 involves kids all over America want silver shamrock masks for Halloween, and Dr. Daniel Chalice seeks to uncover a plot by silver shamrock owner Colonel Cochran. It seems like the main plot is, I don't know if it's just to just murder children on Halloween night, because if they wear the mask and look at the TV when this like catchy fucking jingle is on, we see what it does to one child in particular, and that's what it's going to do to kids all around America when they watch it. A lot of one kid, looks like there's snakes coming out of his mouth and crickets, and the whole point is just I guess mass murder a bunch of children on Halloween night. Interesting plot, and I kind of guess want your thoughts before you get into like the main plot is. Was it a smart move back then, or a brave move back then for them to do this? So like all right, we're not gonna do Michael Myers, or was it naive? Because it's only been 2 movies. Was it naive of them to think that the Michael Myers character wasn't as significant?
Well, I was gonna ask you, what's the temperature at this point? Michael Myers in 78 was a novelty in that there was Black Christmas and Prom Night before it. Or
after it. So Prom Night was after it. Black Christmas was like 4 years before it. So yeah, it was a novelty. And then Friday 13th came like a couple of years after it. So
with that sort of became like, oh, we need a franchise slasher guy. So brave, absolutely. I'm kind of with the producer though, given the time and the business aspect of it, which the producer is on. It's a really dumb move not to go with what the trend is.
Yeah.
But that said, me as obviously a almost 40-year-old movie fan in the year of our Lord 2024, I think it's a genius move, and I wish they would have gone forward with it. Obviously, and what's weird is it made its money back and then some. So it wasn't a complete
wasn't a complete bomb. Yeah, it made like it had a $4.6 million budget. It only made $14.4 million.
It came out the same year as Poltergeist, right?
Nice,
and so it's like you can't,
which was massive.
It's a flop. So I think ultimately 40 plus years hence, I think it's a great novelty within the franchise. But yes, had it been a standalone movie, just call it Season of the Witch from the creators of Halloween, you know what I mean? Something like that. It would have been probably a much larger success. Not Poltergeist large, but would have held its own.
John Carpenter did it almost in response to like how popular Halloween with Michael Myers had become. Like kind of like he maybe lost control of it even with Halloween 2 because he didn't really want to do it. And I wonder if that was part of it too. Almost like hey, I want to bury it, and this won't happen again. But yeah, you're right. I mean, in the climate in that time in the 80s, like everyone wanted their horror movie franchise. By the time Halloween 2 came out, it was actually kind of copying Friday the 13th because Halloween is a pretty bloodless movie, and then Friday the 13th comes out and it's all gore. It is primarily known for its gore effects, and then Halloween 2 came out. And they're like, all right, we got to up the kill factor here. They made that movie more gory. There's more kills. There's more kind of pointless characters being killed off in Halloween 2. And but I think by that time, even though there was only 2 movies with Michael Myers, I think those 2 movies were popular enough that it'd be kind of silly not to continue on without him at that point. Again, a brave pivot, but a pretty not smart one back then.
And the other question I was going to ask you is, I'm not as up on horror franchises as you are, but are there successful franchise horror films that are more like this anthology style?
I'm trying to think because
Like VHS comes to mind, but that's like mini stories, right?
Yeah, it's like mini stories, and like they weren't like box office successful. I mean, they become successful in their own right. I guess this Creep Show kind of is like a different stories than that too, right? But nothing like this. I mean, nothing like Friday 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street or Halloween
And
with Michael
could there
Myers.
be probably in this climate of these elevated horror A24 and I mean like if Blumhouse had come out today with pushing it as this is a new franchise that is anthology based, I think it could work, but you got to be upfront about it in the beginning and say, and maybe tie things together like American Horror Story does, where you get elements from those things. They exist in the same world, but they don't necessarily inform each other in any way.
Yeah, or if I wonder if you had dropped like the 3 and just hit Halloween, Season of the Witch, if that would have been perfectly fine too. I think it seemed like they were just kind of trying to have their cake and eat it too. Like, hey, it's the 3rd Halloween movie, but it's not.
John Carpenter probably would have gone that route, but it wasn't his baby anymore at that point.
I think he kind of was. Universal was like, we gotta do some this idea that you have. We're gonna go with it, but we gotta try to make sure that it is successful in its own right. I also want to say even on that Blu-ray thing I watched, it kept calling it a flop. I thought it was weird to call it a flop. I mean, I guess like you said, in relation to
public opinion, what did it have? 50% Rotten Tomatoes and 29% audience score or something like that.
Yeah, like that. And financially, it made its money back. I mean, it is. It did. I think it made more money than Halloween 5, which I know that's not like a big, a big to do about anything, but it did in the long run. Halloween 4, as much as I love Halloween 4, only made about 3 million more than this, but it was number 1 for 2 weeks, so they kind of take that into consideration. It was number 1 movie in America for 2 weeks. This one wasn't. It also did what it needed to do as far as bringing Michael Myers back in Halloween 4. But again, they all had super small budgets, so they were able to be successful based on that. But I think the reception of something like 4 was better than the reception was to this, so I guess that's why it's easy to call it a flop. But financially, it wasn't. I mean, financially, they made their money back. They are hoping for more. It did mount. If we're looking at compared to the second movie, I think Halloween 2 made like $25 million, and this one made 14.4. So that's a big drop off. So in that respect, it's, I guess, a flop. But making your money back and I mean, Universal probably used some of this money for something else once that they made back from Halloween 3. So I feel bad saying that it's a total flop. But I would have loved to have been around in 82 when this was coming out, and then after it came out, and just the pure audience confusion by it when they went to go see it. Because like you said, there's no internet back then. There's not a lot to really like inform people like this is what's going on with like
you got the trailers before movies and maybe a TV spot.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And you had like, I think Fangoria was like a thing back then too. So like you had that, but not enough to really inform people on like what was going on with the movie and like what they were doing. And but to have been around with that whole like what the backlash was back then would have been really interesting to experience. But I hadn't watched this. I honestly, even though I do like it more than I used to, I don't usually make it part of my like annual Halloween viewing along with the other ones. So it had been a while since I watched it, but I watched it this morning, and I don't know, like I said, I find more to enjoy about every time I watch it. I love John Carpenter's music in it. I think it deserves a bit more credit than it probably gets. It's funny because it's like Halloween 1 and 2 esque in spots. Like you can like hear a little bit of that in it. But I think it's good in its own right. There's some chilling stuff in it too. I don't want to skip to the ending. I'm just gonna name it right now. I think the ending is like the best thing about it. To end on that note is pretty I think ballsy. Probably didn't even get that much credit back then because people were so mad about what it was. but I mean, it deserves a lot more credit for ending on that note. And I think that Tom Atkins is a good lead. And it does have an unsettling vibe about it. Just the idea that this like bigger thing can be going on in your town and you don't know about it, and what the intentions are behind what they're doing. I think that if anything, I think there's some really good ideas. I don't think all of them are like cooked all the way, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Some of them are a bit half baked, but I think for the most part, it works on its own.
Yeah. Agreed. I think it's mostly vibes based, and like I said, plot is secondary on this adventure. And so there's some fun stuff I wrote down here notes wise.
Okay.
Shall we get into some of the nitty gritty here?
Yeah.
Some of the fun stuff I wrote is a lot of the opening scene takes place on my birthday, which I didn't realize. So
there you
go.
go.
A lot of it's on October 23rd. At the beginning, when we see a guy running away from a car, and he gets like scared half to death. He kills a guy by making a car run into him, and so we're sort of thrown into the middle of a scenario, and we don't know what's going on. Everybody probably thought Michael Myers was driving the car or something. They were waiting for that. Reveal.
Chasing him. They're like, oh, they tricked us. He's in the car, guys.
And this guy survives his way all the way to getting taken to the hospital, and we meet our main character. What's his name? Daniel. And what's funny is I've seen this movie maybe a dozen times at this point. And if you asked me in 6 months what the main character does, I'd be like, oh, he's a cop. He's a detective. I always forget he's a doctor. Because why on earth would a doctor go in and do all this investigating that he does in the rest of the movie?
Yeah. And it's funny because Tom Atkins in the thing I watched mentioned that he was like, I don't know what kind of doctor I was really. He was like, I kind of left to go on this like almost like detective crusade. And then he's like, I'm married and I just run off with this young girl like for no reason. I have an affair, I think. He's just
he's hitting on the coroner. He's and like, I mean, it's such a great scene when he and Ellie, we're skipping forward a little bit, but they're in the motel and he's like, should I get a second room? She was like, that seems silly. And he's like, well, where would you want me to sleep? She's like, where do you want to sleep? And he's like, that's a silly question. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
It just oozes 1982. I love it.
Yeah.
I will say for the listeners of this podcast, for the most part, we're going to talk highly on this film. If you want to have a laugh riot, How Did This Get Made did an episode on Halloween 3. I'd never heard an episode of that podcast, but I heard this one. It's got Jason Mantzoukas, Paul Scheer, and I forget who the third co-host is, but you know the two of them. And the two of them say everything you're probably thinking while watching the movie, which is, how is this happening? Why is this happening? And one of their big points about Daniel as a character, he's just an alcoholic, and it's not a character flaw. It just is a character choice. He just is an alcoholic, and he just is a womanizer. It just happens to be. He's not punished for it. He just is. And
it was just like they gave him a character trait without it being like detrimental to the plot or essential to the plot. It's just like
today, an alcoholic would be punished for that. He would be like losing his kids or something. And his wife, his ex-wife, I guess, seems like the naggy one that's just always calling him and complaining that he needs to watch the kids. And he's like, I'm running around with this woman. I need to do this thing, or I'm at a doctor's conference, whatever. He says.
I do love when he's like trying to explain to her that someone was died, like basically on the phone, and she's just not hearing him. She was like,
doesn't that happen all the time there?
Yeah. Like you can just hear her neck. He's like, I know what I said, but someone's dead, and she's just like still nagging about like, well, you're supposed to get the kids, and he's like, all right, I'll take care of them. Like I think he was like, this whole weekend I'll watch them. Like I thought that was just really funny that there's nothing he could say. Like she's probably heard 20 million excuses from him, and like he's like the boy who cried wolf at this point. I thought that was really funny.
And then, so after we meet everybody, then a man in a suit comes into the hospital and we're jumping back now. We're back at the hospital where the guy has been running away. He killed the guy with the car. He got scared. He went to the hospital. He's still alive at this point, clutching onto this Halloween mask, and no one's really like made a point of taking it away from him, but he's holding on to this thing. And what does he even do? He wakes up at one point when the commercial, the Silver Shamrock commercial is playing on TV. It's maybe the first time we hear the commercial.
I think it is the first time, yeah.
And he wakes up and he says, they're all going to come and kill us or something like that.
Yeah.
And then this man in the suit comes in and murders this guy by sticking his thumbs into his eyeballs and kills the guy that we've sort of
highly
been following.
effective, actually.
Yeah.
All the men in the gray suits are pretty scary. They are shot pretty well. A lot of them you kind of see like a lot of times like in the distance or in silhouette, and then when they are like up front, up close and personal, they are pretty relentless. One of them, like you said, is played by Dick Warlock, who is as a stuntman who played Michael Myers in Halloween 2. Had no idea until I watched. I know this is gonna be a weird segue. I watched this like Baywatch documentary on Hulu, and Billy Warlock is his son, and he used to be on Baywatch back in the day, and I did not put that two and two together until I looked up Billy Warlock and saw that Dick Warlock was his dad. And also my mom knows that Billy Warlock was on General Hospital for like a number of years. So yeah, I had no idea that was the case. But yeah, like he's one of the guys, and he was a huge stuntman back in the day. I actually got to meet him when we went to that Halloween thing.
And yeah, they are the Michael Myers of this movie. They stalk their victims. They walk. They're always lurking in the shadows. They're kind of you can kind of see them half lit in a shadow behind in the background. They're very creepy and fun. Yeah. I think it's a great thing. We find out that Daniel is married or was married. He brings some masks home to his kid from the mall. And they're like, oh, we already got masks. We got silver shamrock ones. And then we hear the TV commercial again and the kids are watching. So you get this song. At this point, it's 8 more days till Halloween. And you assume, I think the next time you see it, it's 2 more days till Halloween. But I mean, you assume every day this commercial is running. And so Silver Shamrock has built themselves up some community cachet with the kids, and the kids just want this thing. It's got a catchy song. They're doing a giveaway on Halloween night at 9:00. You got to be in front of the TV to see this thing. The kids are into it. Whatever's happening with Silver Shamrock, their marketing dollars are working. And so all of a sudden didn't he just come home from work? Then he gets a call and has to go immediately back to work.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, I guess, sets the tone for like who he's probably been as a man, even when they were like actively together. While you're talking about the jingle, I guess it sets the tune of London Bridge is falling down, which is I guess they could use without getting
public domain.
It's public domain. So they were just like, hey, just kind of like use it as like the melody and then build lyrics around it. And you know what? Even when I didn't love the movie back in the day, I still recall this part of it. And it's catchy.
I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old that know the song.
I know it. That's awesome.
They know the song. They know nothing about the movie. The 8-year-old continuously asks, like, oh, and then so what happens with Silver Shamrock? I was like, don't worry about it. But he knows the song.
And I still use it on G-Rolls as Halloween is getting closer to indicate that Halloween is almost here. So yeah, it is a very catchy tune. And what's funny is that it comes off kind of annoying until you realize the danger behind it, and then it's really creepy. I mean, like even when I was watching for this, I was like, oh, here it is. And then once you get to that ending where this, what's going to happen when it's on, that's when it becomes, there's a bit of menace behind it, and it works in different ways. I thought that it's pretty interesting about how they use that, because it has to be catchy, it has to be a little bit annoying, but it also has to be a bit eerie at the same time. So I think it accomplishes all three. In just a single jingle. But yeah, you hear it a few times in the movie. You'll either love it or hate it.
I think
I love it.
We grew up in the 90s and commercials were just like that. Like, I'll bet you know the My Buddy theme song still. You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah.
These
definitely do.
It very much works. It's how kids are advertised to. So it really, really worked. So he goes back to work. This guy is murdered with the thumbs through the eyes. Then he chases the man in the suit out of the hospital who's pouring gasoline all over himself. And then he lights himself on fire and he blows up. And we're like, what was that all about?
Yeah.
So all of this stuff has been going down. The guy's daughter shows up and she's like, is that my dad? And they show her the body and she's just appalled. And and what does she say? She gives some sort of information at that point about him. does she know then that he had been investigating the whole mask situation
Yeah, I
with orders
think
or something?
Yeah, she knows a bit about it, which is why they're able to kind of go out on. It feels weird to call it a mission, but I guess they're their mission of sorts. And I'll talk about another. I mean, a lot of the movie, guys, is you being thrusted into things in the middle of it, being thrusted into characters in the middle of it. Ellie is another one of those people who is kind of just. I don't want to say she just shows up, but I feel like the.
I have a theory. I have a theory too on this last watch that really elevated the film for me. When we get there, I'm going to ask what your thoughts are on it. But I really think Ellie's character as a whole has one character flaw, and it's not what you think. But I think there's something even cooler happening that I don't know. Maybe people talk about it. I unfortunately don't hit the zeitgeist too much in terms of what people talk about with this film. But I think there's something more happening here than we think. But she shows up, and and a week later,
just shows up, guys. Just shows up.
Yeah. A week later, she just finds Daniel drinking in a bar at 8 a.m. or something like that, and he there's cartoons on. I mean, it's just.
And I think that's when it's another either I can't remember if we saw the TV spot for Halloween at the house when he goes to drop the mad stuff for the kids, but I do know that we see it. But I do know that we see it in the bar again. So if they're again pushing like, hey, like this is not related to Halloween, we see a TV spot for the original Halloween while he's at the bar again, doing what is signature of his character trait, drinking and being alcoholic,
but not a problem. It's only a problem if you know that it's Sunday morning or whatever it is.
Yeah, he's doing it because the script told him to, guys.
And I think, like you said, it's either there or in the hospital, or maybe even at his house, that we see a news report that something happened at Stonehenge, and it's odd, but that's about all we know. And that does come back, which is just good storytelling. And in walks Ellie again, and she wants to take him to her dad's drugstore, right, where he had been selling these masks. And this is where it was like, man, the Halloween franchise as a whole has three things always: a drugstore, a hospital, and a gas station garage. And this movie has them all. Like, it just like you see those things, and like I said, Dean Cundy just shoots them so well.
I feel like they location scout for all three. Like, that's all we need, guys.
I did want to point out the bar that he's in is called the Buccaneer, and it's in Sierra Madre, where a lot of the stalking scenes in Halloween 2 were shot. So that was kind of cool.
Seemed like he likes that area a bit.
It's a cool, like, Sierra Madre, if you've ever been there, is it's on the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains up like kind of east of me here in the valley. And it's a very one stoplight town that has like a very Main Street type of feel. So like all the times you see Michael Myers walking down the main street of Haddonfield, it's Sierra Madre in Halloween 2. So anyway, I thought that was interesting.
That's real.
And probably Tommy Lee Wallace was like, hey, remember that town I was walking around?
There's a sense of it that feels very isolated too. Like, there's a very feeling to it, which I think helps in this movie. Which I think he accomplishes a lot with the locations he uses in the Halloween movies. Even the fog has like a big sense of isolation to it as well. So yeah. Good job on the production, on scouting on locations.
So they go and they see was there what was it at the store that made them realize they needed to go to Silver Shamrock up in Santa Mira?
Yeah, Santa Mira. And some of these places, like, I can't tell if they're like, when I hear them, I'm like, are these real places? Or are they made up?
It's kind of like the Lost Boys.
They all sound like places that like somewhere in California.
Yeah, totally.
Sound very much like that a bit. That's why I'm always like laughing. Yeah, it does remind me of like the Lost Boys with
Santa Carla, right?
Which is actually Santa Cruz, but they did not want to be called the murder capital of the world, so they were like, change the name, please change the name.
Whatever information they get there, they decide they need to go up to Santa Mira. So they travel, they go to this motel, and they start to learn the lore of the town. It's a working man's town. It's very Irish. And we learn that it's kind of run by a Willy Wonka style a company man that runs Silver Shamrock named, what's his name? Connell Cochran.
Cochran, yeah.
Yeah.
Which sounds very menacing.
Yeah. And there's even a scene where the motel proprietor is like, "Oh, there's Mr. Cochran now," and then there's this car slowly driving through the town, and then he kind of waves.
He is like a Willy Wonka.
You don't even see him there. It's just like it's very Michael Myers shot out the window of the car as it's passing this motel. And notice that at this point, Daniel he says, keep him happy. And he runs to the office to kind of look at the ledger to see who's checked in. He ends up seeing that her dad had checked in like the day before he got attacked or got admitted to the hospital. And during that, the motel guy's helping her with their bags. He's like, travel light, huh? And she's like, yeah, we've had a lot of practice, but I want you to remember that part. And so they go in, and obviously they've begun their investigation into what's going on in this town. It already has like a weird vibe, and you see a lot of security cameras everywhere, right? Kind of reminds me a little bit of another John Carpenter film, They Live, which is like this surveillance all over the place, right? And then immediately they kind of do it, like the two of them. That's where that scene is where she's like, he's like, should I get a second room? What a silly question.
You know what? John Carpenter's used this before, because I mean, I guess like in The Fog, when Tom Atkins again, when he meets Jamie Lee Curtis's character, when he picks her up because she's hitchhiking, I guess it was the 80s, whatever. She was hitchhiking. I love when he picks her up and she just goes like, "Are you weird?" And that's like the only thing that she says to him to like indicate like whether it's okay for her to be driving with him. And then I think by the next scene they've had sex at his house. And that's just, I guess, how either that's just how the 80s were, or that's
it's got to be
John
because
experience.
He's got zero swag. Women just throw themselves at him. He's got he's got the push broom mustache. It's just like
he's definitely like a little bit. He's definitely older than the women that he like. Jamie Lee Curtis is clearly younger than him in The Fog. And then like Stacey Nelkin, who plays Ellie, is younger than him in this movie. So like
and I love her. She's great in this.
She's actually very good in the movie. I liked her a lot. I think in a better film, she would have been even better in this too.
Yeah, for sure.
And
she kind of reminds me of the character in The Fog at the radio station.
Adrienne Barbeau's character. I don't know her name, but
maybe more like look and vibe than anything, because they have that curly hair and all that stuff. But,
I know we're not talking about The Fog. My buddy saw it for the first time, and he was like, "What a shitty part to like be like. You're not even with the rest of the cast. You're just like up in that fucking."
Well, that was the whole thing, right? To get her to be in the movie, there was just like one location, like.
So and then they were together at the time too. Like there's a lot of cool like in the 80s, like John Carpenter. It was a lot of friends, couples. I
don't know if I saw The Fog when I was a kid, but I saw it again a couple years ago, and I was like, "This is a terrific film.
It's so good." Someone actually just picked it today as one of their picks.
Awesome! I can't wait to hear it.
Excited for that. Yeah, but I just thought that was funny that Tom Atkins in 2 movies is just like he easily swoops in on these women, and it's just like like that. No development, no hint of like, oh, we are like feeling like an attractive vibe, other than one scene and one bit of dialogue. And then that's it. Yeah.
That night after they do it, he goes to get like some refreshments at the venue. He goes and does something. Oh, and then we meet that family too. The Buddy, whatever it is, Betty and Little Buddy.
Little Buddy.
And so they come into town. They've got a shop, and he's just trying to see the factory because he's like the top salesperson of masks. And then another lady we meet, her name is what is her name? That's
Are you referring to the Marge? There's also
Marge. That's what it is. I wrote Betty, but yeah, Marge. We meet her just for the sake of then killing her. In a really cool way, though. It's really cool. It was. She's come because she's complaining that the tags are falling off the masks, and she wants to like have a meeting with Connell Cochran about it. And both of them want to put their orders in for next year. They're not taking orders for next year yet. And while she's getting ready for bed, after we've just met her, and she's now getting ready for bed, she finds a tag on the ground. She flips it over, and she's like, "Oh, there's a computer chip or something in here." Immediately grabs a bobby pin or tweezers or something and starts poking at it, and gets zapped by a laser in the face. And it's kind of like creepy, like
it's jarring, it's like her whole mouth kind of opens, and like
some great special
Pretty
effect
much,
makeup and stuff.
Integrates her face. Yeah.
And I think they're doing it again when they hear it or something.
Yeah.
They hear something happen next door.
Oh yeah, they are. They're like, what was that? Yeah.
And immediately they come outside, and only because we met her does Ellie feel bad, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, that's Marge or whatever her name was." And then we meet Connell Cochran, I think, for the first time, and he's like, "Oh, she's gonna get the very best care at the mask factory."
And they talk about it, and they talk about a misfire.
That's right. Yeah,
they call it a misfire. Oh, that's right. And she's not going to the hospital. She's gonna get the best care, not at an emergency room, not in a hospital.
Yeah, and no one asks any questions. So again, terrific film, but objectively a silly,
yeah.
So after she dies, then we're gonna go on a factory tour the next day with the buddies and Betty and their Mr. and Mrs. Smith that are coming to town. Did you notice the lady at the secretary at the factory? I first thought that it was the mom from Mary Poppins that sings the suffragette song, but it's not her.
Yeah.
It is the voice of Flotsam and Jetsam and the voice of Gozer. Gozer the Gozerian from Ghostbusters. So it's her voice.
Okay.
I heard it and I looked. I was like, "Who is it?" And then I saw her and I was like, "Oh, it's an old lady. Who is that?" I looked it up. I unfortunately I don't have her name in front of me, but you'll know her voice the minute you see her. And she's just in this bit role. I'm sure John Carpenter was like, "You should have her in your," or maybe she knew Dick Warlock somehow, or not Dick Warlock, but Tommy Lee Wallace or something. But just a great character actress that has done some iconic voices. And it just stood out to me. I had to write it down. We learned that the masks, what is it? How do we find out about the final processing? Big Buddy has a question about the masks. And I think the kid wanted to take one home. He's like, "Can I take one?" And he's like, "Oh, it hasn't gone through final processing." Connell Cochran's like, he's got such a sing-songy voice.
He's almost like the Count.
Totally.
He's also Don Hurley. He's also in RoboCop. I mean, this is a really fine actor. I mean, he's used to he's not usually. They talk about how he's not usually one to play like villains all the time. But he's pretty sinister here.
I mean, he's great. This is a very Bond villain type guy because he literally later in the film spells out his plan to the protagonist. Like, it's just the classic, I'm going to tell you everything I'm going to do. So, but not to you. I'm going to give you the chance to stop me at some point. After we learn that the masks go through some final processing,
and he has Daniel watch all this too, and like I think at this point they have they gotten Ellie, because I know they're separated.
That happens right after the tour because she sees her dad's car.
Right.
And then she just leaves him. She's like, "I'm gonna go investigate," and that's the last we see of Ellie for a while.
The plot forgot her.
So she sees they see some goons. And he's like, that's one of those guys that was at the hospital when your dad died. And then all of a sudden she sees his car and she's like, had enough.
Yep. And by the way, they're listed as android assassins. These guys.
That's good. I like to have a name to the face.
They are, and they are listed as android assassins in case anyone was wondering.
Very good. I guess at this point, have we learned that they're androids yet? We sure will.
No, not quite. Not quite. You sure will. Yeah.
So later that night, after he's been separated from Ellie for a while, he breaks into the factory, and that's when we discover that there's a robot situation going on. And I think it's when he sees that old lady sitting there, and he shakes her, and her head falls off, and he grabs it.
Falls off.
She could see it's like an automaton. And then all of a sudden, a suited man comes at him, and he just punches the heck out of this dude till his hand goes into his gut
and pulls out wires that look like they be the wires for like if you were getting surround sound for the first time and you're like cooking it up in your room. That's what the wires look like. Where you couldn't you weren't advanced enough to like do like to hide the wires underneath the carpet or anything like that. You weren't advanced. You're like a teenager. Like, I want surround sound. That's what the wires
looks
look
be
like.
damned.
And they look like they just poured like, I don't know what they use for goo in this for the movie, but that's what it.
It's like yak.
It's just it's disgusting enough where you're like, all right, it works for this, but
And it's at that point he's sort of like kidnapped by the rest of the goons, right? And now it's starting to dawn, and it's Halloween morning, and then we realize we're shown that a piece of Stonehenge is at the so the Stonehenge that we saw was missing in the newscast in the beginning is at this factory, and they're harvesting Stonehenge, which now here's the thing is I believe there was actually a story in the news recently that Stonehenge isn't what we've always thought it was. Like the stones are actually not from that far away. But anyway, at this time in history, everybody is sure that there's some magical property to Stonehenge, and this is proof. They went and stole a part of Stonehenge and are using it to put these things into these microchips to run the thing that we don't know is going to happen, but it's something to do with the masks. Right. And so that is going on, and we're starting to learn all of the plan. Connell is starting to really just showcase the whole plan here to Daniel, so that he can see it. Yeah. In that, the way that we see it is the family, Buddy, Betty, and Little Buddy are.
By the way, Little Buddy's annoying. So I know I should feel bad for what happens to Little Buddy. And when he's introduced, it's clear that he is hasn't been prone to discipline, and and his parents are wacky too. So I guess it's just a big old wacky family. Yeah,
it's gosh, what's his name from Vacation? The cousin Eddie. It's basically cousin Eddie and his family.
Pretty much. Yeah, yeah.
And so they're brought into a like a market research type room where it's like, oh, we're going to put you on this
as a TV
living room
setup, and
And as far as they know, they're going to do some market testing on some commercial stuff. So they give the kid a free mask, and they put them in there, and they have a closed circuit camera, like there are all over the place in the town, on the room, and he's going to show Daniel, this is what my plan is. And he starts to play the commercial that's going to play that night at 9 p.m. Nationwide. And the commercial with the kid puts the mask on, starts watching the commercial. And while it's playing, the mom starts giggling like crazy. I kind of thought that maybe it was going to affect the parents in some way. And
I thought maybe she was giggling because of just the jingle, or if she was like, it's just a silly thing that she's listening to. Because at the point when Little Buddy's looking at the TV, you can't quite tell anything is wrong yet. He's just like kind of kneeled down looking at it. It's not until he almost like sits up and then starts like pulling at the mask that you realize that something is wrong.
Afoot.
Yeah, and very wrong, by the way.
Yeah. And what's kind of cool is they get away with a lot because everything is happening under the mask. So outside of seeing Marge's face, who was just a victim of a misfire, you can tell that the kid's head has melted in the mask because he collapses on the ground and the mask just flattens out. And all of a sudden, snakes and bugs start coming out of the mask.
Yeah, they did a good job. They said that on the making of, they were talking about they interviewed the guy who now a man who played Little Buddy. And he talked about how they did that in installments basically, and of course like they did a cast of his head for like when he's on the ground, and then like the bugs and everything are coming out, and it's supposed to be like his face like kind of flattened. But as far as it like disintegrating on his face, he had to be the one to pull it, and they only had one. So they told this kid like basically don't fuck it up. So like he had to get the pulling of it right, but he was the one that was doing like, and like honestly, if you haven't seen the movie, I know this image is pretty iconic from it. I mean, you could probably look up Halloween 3, and that's one of the first images you'll see is of this kid pulling away this mask that looks like it's kind of like melting away at his face. And I think the installments they show of it affecting him are really good. Actually probably one of the stronger scenes in the movie.
Totally,
and he starts, it is melting his face. He's ripping at it, and then finally he falls on the ground, and like all these like snakes and crickets, which is such a weird. I mean, I thought they're like effective too.
I guess it kind of reminded me of like like I know they're crickets, but when I was a kid, I kind of thought locusts looked like crickets. So like, was it like kind of an end times style?
Oh yeah, it might have been like kind of like that.
Nod, yeah. And immediately the snake bites the parents, and then the parents die. So we learn that the plan is, and
Not just to kill children. I was being funny in the beginning. There is like a plot.
Oh yeah, he
there
wants.
is like there is like a which in the when I first saw the movie a long time ago, because like when you're like not paying attention to everything, I was like, in my brain, I was like, so he just wants to mass murder children? Was that the? Right. is that it?
I mean, here's the thing: is you only get one line of dialogue about it, and the whole
Explains
thing is
it,
like, yeah. And what's funny is this is the first time you hear Saw Wayne in the franchise, but then it's funny they kind of keep that through line going through 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, they're like, we'll use that.
Yeah, which is the ancient Halloween ritual where the blood or the hills ran red with the blood of children sacrificed and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And he's basically like butthurt that kids only care about masks and candy, and so essentially he's created a gag company that gained so much cachet with people that then he created Halloween masks that everyone wanted, and now his final solution has come to fruition where he's going to now play a commercial nationwide, get everybody to watch it because they want to win the giveaway, and they're all going to melt their faces. Now, as a kid, I'm pretty sure I was out trick-or-treating past 9 p.m.
Oh, yeah, 5 p.m. Yeah, I wasn't
so
in front
like
of the TV.
I'm not sure how that really works.
This would be something you could probably catch me in like in my teens and 20s, because I probably was like not always going to parties. I'm like, I'm gonna watch a movie at home or something. Rather than if I was a kid, I was still out trick-or-treating because there's still some time left.
Yeah,
to get stuff done.
And so you learn that he's basically created this whole idea, I guess, to bring back the traditions.
Yeah, he wants to his plans to resurrect ancient rituals from his native Celtic lands by sacrificing children.
Now we learn why the town is so Irish and all that jazz.
And all that stuff. Yeah, there's some satire about commercialism here somewhere that could have been like more fleshed out, I guess.
The How Did This Get Made podcast actually pointed out like Tom Atkinson went to the mall and got the masks, and she was like, no, I got these silver shamrock masks from the drugstore, like the mom and pop shop. And and so there's some sort of message here. I don't really know. Next thing, there's been a mortician that we've checked in with every now and again that apparently Daniel has an affair with at some point too.
Yeah, she's another woman that he's been sleeping with. Yeah, she like who seems lovely in the few scenes that she has, because she's mostly just alone. Like
she's like the coroner or something.
The coroner trying to looking into like some stuff that happened earlier in the movie. But
so the guy that blew himself up at the hospital, she's been trying to figure out, and she's like, they just keep sending car parts back from the lab.
Yeah.
All of a sudden there's a suited man there, and he kills her with a drill. Once she discovers what's actually happening. I'm not sure what changed in what she saw. It was still just components and things on the table, but somehow she gives a look of realization, and she gets a drill to the head. Classic Halloween style kill. It actually, I thought, was a cool scene and pretty effective.
A really cool scene.
Then we see Halloween on TV again, because now they've locked Tom Atkinson in a room, and they're like, you're gonna they put a mask on him. You're gonna watch him, and they turn on the TV and Halloween's playing.
I will say the really cool thing, it's like I think Cochran gives like one final bit of dialogue, and this is for the first time in the movie that Halloween 3 music isn't playing as the main theme, like because you're not seeing because the image that you're seeing is Cochran, you're not seeing the TV image just yet. And it's the actual Halloween music from the first movie being played.
It reminds me of the scene when Randy is in the
Scream,
living room in Scream.
When he's watching Scream, and it's like, honestly, it's just a silly small moment, but I got chills watching it because it was like it really did work. Because one, Cochran is evil, like he exudes evil, but it was really cool, like to have this like isolated moment where this other bit of it's almost, it confuses your brain a bit, because like you're like, oh, hey, I'm not watching Halloween, right? You know that, but like it really is like I think that is the most effective moment of like using whatever they need to use from Halloween and using it here. Works really well. Yeah,
it's a really cool usage, a way to get around it and make it work. I don't know.
Yeah,
loved it. And then all of a sudden, so he's left in this room. He gets the mask off, and in one shot throws the mask over the closed circuit television camera up in the corner, like just nails it.
Like, and he's gonna everything without without any explanation, just because.
And it's just a doctor. Remember, he's a doctor. He's not a cop. He's not a detective. He's a doctor. And he he calls his ex to try to get her to not let the kids watch the commercial, and he just get yelled at by her the whole time.
Yeah, if you listen to us about how about her earlier, she doesn't listen to him at all.
No, she's
and
had
by
it
the
up
way,
to
yeah,
here,
I think you only have like one scene of her like in person. The rest of it is just her on the phone, and like the stuff with her on the phone is just yelling over him.
Yeah.
She sounds like the nanny for like Muppet Baby.
Totally.
Yeah.
Or like
Charlie Brown.
Charlie Brown.
Yeah. That's all you hear in the background. It's like if you're thinking of like what a stereotypical like, oh, this person's being a nag, that's what it sounds like.
So he throws the camera over, escapes, gets on the phone. She does nothing. He sees Ellie on like a table in like a room. So he finds her, helps her to escape, and she's kind of out of it, but okay. Then there's this great scene where they break into like the main area where they're chiseling away at the Stonehenge, and they need to sneak across this room. They just grab a rolling rack. It's a baker's rack. If you're familiar with them, you see them at like clothing stores or retail establishments where they need to move lots of product around. It's just full of masks, and they basically like this is the equivalent of like hiding under a plant and then walking with the plant thinking that's going to hide you. They hide behind this rolling rack and roll it across the whole factory floor, hiding behind it, but it's just a rack rolling across the floor and no one looks. I love that scene. I had to write it down because it was terrific. And then all of a sudden, Tom Atkinson's like, wait, I have an idea. And he sneaks up to where one of the computers are. There's this whole television area where I guess they're running the commercial out of this factory or something, or maybe somehow this factory floor where they're chiseling away at Stonehenge also has a ton of TVs in it. He presses a few buttons on a computer thing, and the commercial starts to play on the factory floor, and everybody's like, whoa, what's going on? And then he grabs like a box of the microchip things that go on the masks, and he sneaks up to the rafters of the factory. And what's funny here is I haven't been on many sound stages, but I've been on enough that this was just literally shot in the rafters of the sound stage that they built this set in. I was like, that's just the sound stage. It's great. So they go up to the rafters of the sound stage, and then while the commercial's playing and all the robots are standing around not knowing what to do, they dump the chips down, they rain down, and because the commercial's playing, I suppose, the lasers shoot out and kind of kill everybody. And then Colonel Cochran has this great like Bond villain thing where he looks up and gives like the golf clap, like you got me,
like well done.
I'm not even mad. So I wrote here Stonehenge takes revenge, and it just sort of because that's kind of I guess what happens. And so now they and then there's the obligatory awesome shot where they run away from the factory, Ellie and Daniel, and the whole thing blows up behind them. It's great. They get in the car and they're driving off, and all of a sudden you realize that Ellie's being kind of weird, and she turns toward Daniel and starts attacking him. Now in the middle of this fight scene, there's a whole Evil Dead style fight scene that comes up because he crashes the car, they're wrestling, and then she starts being pulled apart, and she's a machine. She's an automaton. Question. I believe every time I've watched this movie, I'm like, I guess they somehow like pulled her insides out and turned her into an automaton, and he left with an automaton. But was she an automaton the whole time? So, I don't know why. I don't know why she would need to go get this doctor who eventually ended up foiling the plans, and she aided. But was she ever this guy's daughter? Like, and was the whole plan to somehow get him too? Like, I don't know. I like that version of the story, and I haven't connected all the dots yet. But I almost wonder, was she an automaton the whole time?
So can you like have sex with an automaton and not realize?
I wondered. I did wonder that, but they were full of goo. They were full of goo.
That was my thing. I was
like, she did take a shower. Yeah, I was like, maybe that didn't work. And she did help him destroy the factory, but like, she helped him destroy the factory after he rescued her. When that would have happened, so I don't know, but it does elevate the film a little bit to me if she never was his daughter. The guy's daughter in the first place, and she was just another cog in the plan. I don't
I'm
know.
looking at it's so funny because people have different views of this. Some people think that when she's captured, she's basically what you used to do, a killed or whatever, and then they replace her
Invasion of the
with
Body
a
Snatchers,
droid.
sure. Yeah.
And yeah, and then some people think that she was always programmed to be to kind of almost like lure him there, but it'd be a weird plan.
But why him? Like he's a
Yeah, I
doctor.
know.
Like, yeah.
I know. But no one seems to fully, I assumed my interpretation was once they got like separated from each other, she was like kind of captured, and then I'm assuming the real her was killed, and then then they turned her into a droid or whatever what do you want to call it. But that was my interpretation of it. I can't imagine she was a robot or whatever the entire time. That can't.
And that was why I said remember the suitcase thing, because she had like nothing. Like a robot wouldn't need to pack anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, a lot of people say I'm pretty sure she's a droid only at the end of the movie. I'm not sure what happened to the actual Ellie though. Either they killed her or she died when the building burned down. Yeah. A lot of people do question it, but yeah, I do think there was just a switch. I remember that was the most confusing thing about this movie when I first saw it back in the day. I was like, "Whoa, was she a robot the entire time?" And then
it's a fun twist, but only if you don't think about it too much. Yeah.
And by the way, Ellie, the droid robot automaton, it doesn't die right away.
No. Yeah, it's very Evil Dead. Like
it's very Evil Dead, and kind of her arms kind of come out after him. It's very comical.
He pulls her head off. Her body with one arm attacks him. The arm jumps off the like when he pulls her arm off in the car. That arm attacks him later. It's like
it's so comical at this point. Yeah,
and then he ends up running to get to a phone, and he runs to that same garage from the beginning of the movie. With that same poor guy that works there, that's probably like, what the F is happening in this town?
Why are you strange? Why people always come to
my and so he ends up utilizing the phone to, I guess, call all the TV stations or the broadcast station that's going to air the commercial across all stations.
Which I guess was easier in the 80s. I can't think of like that. Yeah.
And then is it nationwide? Because we do see like great shots of like kids trick-or-treating across the country.
Which also are very effective too. I thought that was like giving the sense that this was going to be everywhere.
Yeah, it was really good. And they were all like, second unit director went out and shot that stuff. It's like one little camera mount, and it's just a shot of kids. Shot of kids. I like the Los Angeles shot because it's just like a sunset in the background with kids walking by.
It's
like nothing about this says LA to me.
Yeah.
And then so he gets two channels to stop, and then a third he's just screaming, please turn it off, and then we cut to black. It's such a badass move. I love it. It's because you don't know what happened. Did all the kids at home, it's just ultimately, if you think about it too much, it doesn't work. But I don't know, I think it was cool.
Yeah, I was thinking about the ending itself. Like if you really overthink it one, why wouldn't they stop the third and final commercial from airing? They got through the first two. They're listening to him enough to be like, all right, this guy, we don't know.
Apparently, only needed to call one person to do all.
And one person do all of it too, right? So it gets like two of them turned off. Yeah. And then you have to I guess kids would turn to like if they're like, if it wasn't on one channel, they would turn to another to find it again.
Yeah.
If you overthink it like if not falls apart, but it loses its effectiveness a bit. But in the moment, for the sake of the movie, I mean, from this morning to the first time I saw it a long time ago, that part of the movie gave me chills too, because it was like, this is how this plan is going to work. Like this master plan of his that, what this guy planned on doing. Yeah.
There's something very final about that last shot. So like, I remember watching it the first time thinking, I really hope this cuts to black. And it did. I was like, perfect.
And this is sold by Tom Atkins, who sells the hell out of it. I mean, it's all him. Yeah, his kind of like frantic, trying to get it to get turned off. I don't know what the black dude's doing while he's sitting there. Who's probably still like, why are these crazy white people like at my place again? But it is a really good ending though, and it's a pretty bleak one. I mean, I don't think a lot of movies would even do that now. A lot of horror movies, like I mean, a lot of like American horror movies tend to want to end things on like a happier note. Like give people hope. Foreign horror films not so much. They're like whatever, like hope is dead. Yeah, but like it's such a good ending to the movie because like it's pretty chilling. But I still like in that theater in 1982. By the time this is over, are people like that was scary, or like what the fuck was that? And you know, I'm imagining like did people sit through the whole thing? Did they walk out? Like what was like the vibe during the whole thing?
You know what I almost want to do? Like, what if there was one more shot where you cut to the person he's on the phone with and it's just Michael Myers and then he just hangs the phone up?
What if like immediately confuse people more, man? They were like, what the hell? Is he in it or is he not in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good solid ending for, you know, it's a, like we said, it is a silly movie, but on its own as an 80s horror movie, I think it holds its own pretty well.
Yeah, I love it.
And one must not be like me, like I was a long time ago, who tried to pretend like it didn't exist. And this is all based on what I've heard growing up, right? I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch it. He's not in it. Like, who cares?
I mean, you and me, we were 12. You were like, don't watch it.
Yeah.
I was like, I will never watch this movie.
Yeah, you would have thought I had already had sat down with it, and like at that point I hadn't, and I was like, I was just like, nah, it's like he's not in it. There's no point. Let's just skip to part 4. And so, but I'm glad that a few people were like, hey, watch it. It's on its own. It's pretty good. And like we said, it, you know, they said like over time, even though it was perceived that way, like a lot of critics and fans alike have reevaluated it in the years since it originally came out. They feel that it is I mean, there are Halloween 3 fans that like it more than some of the actual.
I was going to ask your ranking. I wrote my ranking down while we were chatting about it. Including
I don't know.
Film,
that's hard. I wonder if I can rank it that high. I wonder if I have it on my Letterboxd. I know I ranked Halloween movies before, and
I have it at number 4.
So that's after. So what do you have it after? You have.
I've got 1, 4, H2O, and 3.
Damn, that's.
And then
high.
I've got 2018, 2, 5, 6, Kills, Ends, Resurrection. And then
what is
Rob
everyone's problem with Kills?
I think
we're covering that too, actually. On the
I do have to revisit it. I think I haven't seen it since the first. Like I've watched Halloween 2018 many times. Kills and Ends, I think I've only seen once. So
I think I was like, yo, it's living up to its namesake. That's all that needs to happen is just like, let's just watch him go like, you know, killer mode in this movie, and that's about it. But no, I know a lot of people that don't really love it.
I think putting Kills below 6 is bad, but I think when I say 6, I kind of mean the producer's cut. So like,
no, there you go.
Yeah.
And as far as how critics felt about this movie, then some of these are funny. The New York Times struggled to apply a definite label to the film's content. They said Halloween 3 manages to not easy feat of being anti-children, anti-capitalism, anti-television, and anti-Irish all at the same time. He said, on the other hand, he says that the film is probably as good as any cheerful ghoul could ask for. Other critics were far more decisive in their assessments. Roger Ebert wrote that the film was a low-rent thriller from the first frame. Jesus. He did praise Stacey Nelkin's performance, though. As we mentioned, she is pretty good in the movie. Let's see. Another reviewer called it a hopelessly jumbled mess. Another reviewer pointed to the absence of Michael Myers and the film's nihilistic ending as reasons why the film dissatisfied reviewers and audiences alike. Jim Harper called Wallace's plot deeply flawed. Harper argues any plot dependent on stealing a chunk of Stonehenge and shipping it secretly across the Atlantic is going to be shaky from the start. He noted there are 4 time zones across the United States, so the Western Seaboard has 4 hours to get to the fatal curse-inducing advertisement off air. Not a great plan. Roger Ebert is talking more about the plot. He's like, what's Cochran's plan? Kill the kids and replace them with robots? Why?
Because that one line of dialogue, they only care about masks and candy.
Yeah. God. Academics find the film full of critiques of the late 20th century American society. Historian Nicholas Rogers points to an anti-corporate message where an otherwise successful businessman turns oddly irrational and seeks to promote a more robotic future for commerce and manufacture. Cochran's astrological obsessions are psychotic hatred of children overrode his business sense. Tony Williams argues that the film's plot signified the results of the victory of patriarchal corporate control. In a similar vein, Martin Harris writes that Halloween 3 contains an ongoing cynical commentary on American consumer culture, probably best when viewed that way as a movie. And I kind of agree with that. I mean, there's some smart. I think, like I said, I think a lot of the ideas kind of half baked. There is a lot of there is satire in here about commercialism, capitalism. I think it's just the movie's only 99 minutes and it's trying to be a lot of things, and there's not enough time for it to really dive into all those things, but you get a sense of what it is. And like you mentioned earlier, the plan, is only in one line of dialogue. There's no big explanation as to why we're doing this, and this, it is one line
I will say,
dialogue.
I will say that's a piece of good. That's where you could give the movie marks. Is like you said, it's 99 minutes. It moves. It really moves. It never feels like it's lagging to me anyway. So I always recommend people watch this movie because I'm like, if you want to see a fun horror film, don't consider that it's a Halloween franchise film. Just watch it as a standalone horror film. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yep. And David Gordon Green actually he paid homage to it, and
that's right.
Halloween Kills, there's 3 kids wearing the 3 Don Post masks as well. And I'm sure it has a really eerie image of them murdered. We don't see them get murdered, but they're definitely dead when we see them again. So it was a cool, nice little homage to Halloween 3. It was cool that he didn't ignore it. I'm not gonna, because he pays homage to I think almost all of them throughout 20 kills and ends. So
I just recently watched the Sonic the Hedgehog film, which I hadn't seen, and not only is it super fun, but there's so many Easter eggs if you are familiar with the franchise or the video games and the cartoon from the 90s. It's a really fun watch. And I do really like what David Gordon Green did with the new films. Is he really, like you said, paid homage to everything up to that point.
And box office wise, this movie earned $6.3 million in its opening weekend, probably because of curiosity. That is bad when you look at the grand total, because that means it fell off like a brick. It was distributed to Universal. It grossed a total of $14.4 million, but was the worst performing Halloween film at the time until the release of Halloween 5 in 1989. Several other horror films that premiered in 1982 performed far better, including, like you mentioned, Poltergeist, that grossed $76.6 million. Friday the 13th Part 3 3D grossed $34.5 million, and Creepshow grossed $21 million in 1982 as well.
Wow. That's a pretty solid year of
that was a really good horror movie. But also, guys, I mean, like we said, revisionist history, it has an audience now, for sure. They are I've met some diehard Halloween 3 fans that love the movie. Kind of just wish that it would have, like we said, would have been called Season of the Witch and been its own thing. Which is a lot of Halloween fans wouldn't be so close-minded to even check it out, because there are still Halloween fans that don't want to really acknowledge it as a thing. But I think it holds up well. I think it's actually a solid little spooky season movie too. I watched it this morning. Kind of wish I wouldn't have fallen asleep and watched it at night last night, because I think it probably would have played even better at night. There's stuff like you said, it's a vibe more than
it's very, very dark. That opening scene reminds me a lot of Terminator and Christine. All the blacks feel really blue and deep. I think Dean Cundey did an awesome job. Probably I wouldn't like it as much if it weren't shot by Dean Cundey.
And as far as where I rank it, I'm trying to figure out, and I would still rank it lower than low on my list, but it's not because it's necessarily bad. It's because you're thinking
I think
Halloween
the smart
1.
move is just not to consider it as part of the Halloween franchise.
Halloween franchise, hell, I think overall I might enjoy it more than Halloween 6, even Halloween 5. I actually probably enjoy it more than Rob Zombie's Halloween, and most definitely more than his Halloween 2. That movie is just a dumpster fire of Dookie shit. I watched it last year because Jackson was like,
I remember you really wanted to give it another fair shot.
Yeah, and only because Jackson was like, you should rewatch it, and not because Jackson loves it. He was just like, just rewatch it, and it's just so dark and ugly and grungy. And I know that was that's his thing, but then it just doesn't look like a Halloween movie at all. I mean, it's just, but I think that's what he wanted to make, right? They told him like, do whatever you want with it, and he certainly did. And he upped.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
He upped the ante having no likable characters in it whatsoever. Like the fact that Lori is not even likable is Annie's kind of likable, but then she's kind of a bitch. But the only reason because she was attacked too, in that previous movie, and she's like, well, I'm getting through it. Why aren't you? That kind of thing.
Get over it.
And the only reason that you're kind of connected to Annie in any kind of way is because, like, well, it's Danielle Harris. So that's why. So you're like,
that's
oh,
right.
That's why. Yeah, that's why you're connected to it. But yeah, I would say I like Halloween 3 than some of the other ones I mentioned. I mean, yeah. But I will say I'm not mad that they changed course and brought Michael Myers back for Halloween 4. I mean, you know how much I love Halloween 4.
Me too. Yeah.
And I'm glad we got him back. But again, a nice little experiment in the middle.
Absolutely. For what it is, I think it's terrific. And I wrote this thought down. I think this could be really successfully remade for today's audiences.
I think so too. Because I mean, you get the right filmmaker and right writers to like even fill in some of the holes, because there are some. Yeah. And I think you have a pretty more solid movie here.
Yeah, I think there's really good, solid idea here. And I mean, you replace the TV with phones, and then you are more likely to get the kids while they're out trick or treating. And
there could be some, like, actually with the marketing, there could be some really cool like Ring X kind of marketing where it's like when you watch The Ring in theaters when it came out and she played the video, the audience is like, oh, I also watched that video. So it feels like you're involved in the whole, like, in 7 days you're gonna die. Like, I mean, they could really market the movie in a way that it's pretty frightening. I think it could work really well today. Yeah. I mean, they've remade everything else.
I know.
Like,
and like in times where people are like, that's what they're gonna remake.
Yeah.
Halloween 3. I don't see why not. And lastly, what do we think Jackson would think of Halloween 3?
You know what? Just knowing him for a little over a year now, I think he would appreciate the strides that it makes and the moves that it makes and some of the plot elements that I don't know if he would like it overall as you know what I'll say? He's smart enough to separate from the main Halloween franchise. I think he'd be able to look at it as a standalone 80s horror movie and appreciate things about it. I think he might say the same things that we're saying, that it is silly and it doesn't all come together. But it is, I knowing him, I know he would like really love the ending because he likes bleak kind of like,
my guess is he gives it a positive 2 stars.
There you go. Okay, so that's what you know about him. Like when he gave like Bill and Ted positive 2.5.
Yeah.
Like, is that positive? Honestly, I would give it. I would land solidly on 3, like maybe a low 3, but like a 3 of like just based on entertainment value. Yeah. I would give it a 3 if I had to.
I think I'm at 3.5 because it's objectively not a great film,
right?
But it's so fun. I give it 3.5. I think
it's a vibe.
Yeah,
it's definitely a vibe. Yeah, I mean, like we said, it's a fun movie that you should check out, and again, walk into it without thinking like,
is it streaming anywhere? Can we suggest anybody?
Oh, let me look at that because I'm Mr. Physical Media over here. I have even for a movie I don't enjoy that much, I have 3 copies of it. I mean, I do enjoy it, but like for what I did enjoy it. So even when I didn't enjoy it that much, I meant to say I had multiple copies of this movie. The only one I don't have is the 4K, but I guess after talking about it,
it looks like it's on Peacock right now.
Oh, of course it is. Oh yeah, because the other Halloween movies are it's NBC Universal. So yeah, so anyone's connected to Universal are probably on there. So Halloween 2 is probably there, and 3, and then the 3 newer ones. So you should definitely check it out. Also, I have this collector's Blu-ray here that you can get. I don't know if they sell that like Halloween box set anymore. I know it's discontinued a lot of places with all the Blu-rays in it, but it was in there too. And I have a DVD that's tucked away somewhere in my closet.
And then the 4K, is there anything new on the 4K in terms of bonus content?
No, just the the 4K scan. That's it. but that's if you care
when
about that.
when it is a 4K, do they? I remember when it was such a big deal that like Halloween was not only upresed for Blu-ray, but it was rescanned from the film negative, and Dean Cundy
Yeah,
like oversaw the color session. Like when they
yeah.
upres to 4K, are they just upresing it? Are they rescanning the negatives? Like what do we know? What do you know about that?
I think they're rescanning the negatives when
Cool.
they're doing it. Yeah, which is good. And I know there's been a lot of issues about like every new edition of it's even the original Halloween that comes out. And this happens with a lot of movies that you know originally were made to look like I want to say like dark, but like where you're not supposed to see everything. Everything that isn't supposed to look so like clear. Some
Yeah.
people don't love that when they're boosted up to like look so good because it's like, oh well, that stuff in the foreground I probably wasn't supposed to see that clearly. and now I can.
I remember it is. What about when you see it in a movie theater though, right? Like I remember the first time
true.
I saw The Exorcist in the movie theater, I saw so much I had never seen before on
Yeah,
TV.
I did too actually. It definitely, I don't think it hurts. I mean, James Cameron is going through this now with True Lies, Aliens, and The Abyss, and he did 4K scans for it. Some of the we did True Lies. The episode hasn't come out yet, but I watched that 4K, and it's so clear that you can like see when Arnold Schwarzenegger's stuntman steps in and when he steps out in certain shots. That's how clear it looks. But in some shots, it looks great. I watched some of Aliens and it looks great. Other shots, like it looks too clean. But like
I was
James
talking
Cameron,
to somebody and they were saying that he put like beauty box filters on people's skin though. Like
Yeah,
Jamie Lee
he did.
Curtis's skin is like smoothed out as opposed to like seeing actual pores in her. And that's like
he's completely, and he kind of was like, he, how he is. He did that. I forgot what interview he did recently where he was just like, you're basically, won't you just complain in your parents' basements, blah, 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 blah. Like, at the end of the day, it's his baby. So if he thinks it looks better that way, so be it. I shouldn't see Arnold Schwarzenegger stuntman in the shot. It's
That's
so
true.
clear. But yeah, it's his baby. He can do what he wants with it.
Yeah.
That's fine. But yeah. Well, thank you for joining me for Halloween 3.
Thanks, man. This was going to be my suggestion if you hadn't, if it weren't on the list, because I was like, I have an idea of what I want to do, but let me see this list you have, and I was like, boom, done.
Yeah, I'm glad because like I've wanted to talk about it on podcasts. But Jackson had other Halloween movies he wanted to watch.
Of course,
first.
yeah. This is low stakes.
So this one was good to do, and and we've done certain movies twice down the line. So if he ever wants to like hop on and talk about it again, we can figure it out. But yeah, this is our third episode of our Tales of Horror series. We have a lot more coming up. I think some people have picked The Prowler, The Fog. We have the original Last House on the Left. Someone did pick Halloween Kills, so that'll be fun to talk about. We also have In a Violent Nature. I know someone picked that. Jackson picked Creep and The Hitcher. So we're doing that together. And like I said, we have Jennifer's Body and Sorority Row, and there are a few other ones that we're going to do. There are some anniversaries that I might ask I haven't asked David yet, but I might ask him to help out with. Like if no one picks Wes Craven's New Nightmare, I still need to do it because it's 30 years in October since it came out. So some friend of the show will probably help me do that movie. And then, The Grudge turns 20 in October, and it's Sarah Michelle Gellar, so I got to do The Grudge. So I got to do The Grudge. And then, Saw turns 20 in October, so there's a lot of, really fun ones this year. Probably doing a lot more than I should for Tales of Horror, but this was very successful for us last year, and hopefully will be successful for us this year as well. So we have a lot more episodes coming up, and as always, you can catch us wherever you get your podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods. Those are all great, but Playlist is our podcast network, and they have a app called the Playlist Studio app that you can get in the iOS store or in the Google Play Store, where you can listen to our show and other great shows as well. So make sure to get that too. You can also find us on YouTube, where they're actually going to be uploading more of our episodes in the next couple of days. So if you don't follow us there, you can subscribe to on that channel as well. More stuff coming up besides Tales of Horror. We also have the new show, and there's some deep dives coming out as well. It's a very busy time at Back to the Blockbuster. And we're trying to fit in Jackson as much as he can. Like I said, with the way the episodes are being done, you might not even notice that he's not on as much. Just I personally notice as someone who's been on the show with him every week for over a year. But he will be done very soon. He's wanted me to let everyone know that he's not leaving or going anywhere. because everyone knows that has listened to the show. We've had like some turnaround, and that's not a secret. But Jackson's here to stay, and we actually have talked about all this stuff months in advance before any of these things happen to make it work. And we had the option of taking a long break while he was gone or keeping the momentum going, and it was his choice to keep the momentum going because he didn't want to lose that while he was gone. So he'll hop back onto something that is still going strong, and with the help of people like you and everyone else that's helping out in his absence as well. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for supporting the show. David, as always, thank you for jumping on. You can always jump on whenever you want to. Just because you're on once for Tales of Horror doesn't mean you can't be on twice. So if there's something else you want to do, if you have time for it, please let me know.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Yep. And until next time, guys, peace.
Later.